The capital punishment sentence of Brad Keith Sigmon was carried out tonight pursuant to the order of the South Carolina Supreme Court and in accordance with state law. The execution was performed at 6:05:50 by a three-person firing squad and he was pronounced dead by a physician at 6:08 p.m.
And the curtain opened. Brad Sigmon was strapped into the chair. Unlike other death executions I've seen, he was in a black jumpsuit, had black Crocs-like shoes on. He was completely strapped in. It looked like there was a harness over him. There was a strap over his head. His ankles were shackled. He had a covering over his mouth that, was from about here down. When the curtain opened, he looked towards his attorney, who was on the front row of the witness. They kind of exchanged. They had an exchange. I couldn't tell because his mouth was covered what they were mouthing back and forth to each other, but it looked like he was just saying he was okay to his attorney, Sigmon did. At that point, they had the attorney came out and read the final statement. When the final statement was read, well, let me back up one step. He had a target over his heart when the curtain opened. It was already there. It was a little rectangle white paper, or I'm assuming it was paper, could have been cloth. They had a bullseye on it. It had one outer ring and one inner ring on it. It was red. The bullseye was red. So they came out, read his final statement. At that point, when that was finished, a prison employee got a hood, put the hood over Sigmon's head. Then that prison employee walked from the chair the 15 feet over to where there's a brick wall, and at that point there's a black shade, like one of those shades that you pull down and it rolls up. So that there's a black shade there. The prison employee lifted up the shade, and then from that point it was a little less than 2 minutes of nothing at that moment. I mean, you could see Brad Sigmon took several pretty deep breaths, and then suddenly the shots rang out at, I believe Christy said it was 6:05 and 50 seconds. At that point, you did see a small red stain on Sigmon's chest. It was irregularly shaped, but oval, if that makes sense. I mean, like it wasn't like a circle. It was an oval shape. I saw it looked like he may have taken a couple of his chest rose and fell about 2 times immediately after the shots. You could see a tiny piece of like tissue or something that was coming out of that. At that point, also his arm tensed up when he got shot. There's kind of this brief moment of tensing. After that, the doctor was in there fairly quickly, less than a minute after the shots came. Couldn't see exactly what the doctor did because my viewpoint was blocked from his back, but he did an examination for about 90 seconds, and then he walked back towards the other side of the room, walked from left to right as I'm viewing. And then that's when the prison employee announced 6:08 is the time of death.
At 6:01, the curtain was pulled back, exposing the room to us. Brad Sigmon was already strapped into. He had the chair did not have arms, so his arms were down to his side and clipped in with restraints. His feet were restrained. He had a strap across his forehead, and he also had something that appeared a little like a sling that covered his mouth. But he could move his head just a little bit, so he moved his head to the extent that he could toward the witness room, appeared to be exchanging some words with Bo King, his attorney. Kind of took in the whole witness room to the extent that he could. I want to comment on the expression that he had. Again, you couldn't see his whole face, but I did not pick up on anything in his expression that would have indicated fear. At 6:03, they put the hood on, and at 6:04, they lifted the shade on the what I would describe as cubbies that the executioners were going to shoot through. We could not see the guns. There was also no countdown or anything like that to tell us when the shots would be fired. The shots were fired at 6:05. I perceived that they were all fired at once, that it was just one sound. His arms flexed. There was something in his midsection that moved. I'm not necessarily going to call them breaths. I don't really know, but there was some movement that went on there for 2 or 3 seconds. It was very fast. I did see a splash of blood when the bullets entered his body. It was not a huge amount, but there was a splash that you could see kind of protrude from the wound, and the target was, you couldn't really see what happened to the target. It just wasn't there anymore.
This is much, one of the differences I tell people is this is much quicker. Lethal injections in South Carolina from start to finish take about 20 minutes these days. When I look back, the electrocution took, they give one big jolt of electricity for several seconds, but then there's another jolt for a minute or two. So there's a longer period of what happens. This, I mean, it was instantaneous, and the time from the shots being fired to the time death was declared was a little over 2 minutes, I think, if I remember correctly.
Thank you.